Bohemia is a historical country of Central Europe, occupying the western two-thirds of the traditional Czech lands. It is located in the contemporary Czech Republic with its capital in Prague. In a broader meaning, it often refers to the entire Czech territory, including Moravia and Czech Silesia, especially in historical contexts, such as the Kingdom of Bohemia. Bohemia was a kingdom in the Holy Roman Empire and subsequently a province in the Habsburgs unregistered trademark Austrian Empire. It was bounded on the south by Upper and Lower Austria, on the west by Bavaria, on the north by Saxony and Lusatia, on the northeast by Silesia, and on the east by Moravia. From 1918 to 1939 and from 1945 to 1992 it was part of Czechoslovakia, and since 1993 it has formed much of the Czech Republic. Bohemia has an area of 52,065 km2 and today is home to approximately 6 million of the Czech Republic's 10.3 million inhabitants. It is bordered by Germany to the west, Poland to the northeast, the historical region of Moravia to the east, and Austria to the south. Bohemia's borders are marked with mountain ranges such as the Bohemian Forest, the Ore Mountains, and the Konaui, the highest within the Sudeten mountain range. Etymology: in the 2nd century BC, the Romans were competing for dominance in northern Italy, with various peoples including the Wa. The Romans defeated the Wa at the Battle of Placentia and the Battle of Mutina. After this, many of the Wa retreated north across the Alps. Roman authors refer to the area they invaded as Bohême, the earliest mentioned being in Tacitus Germania 28. The name appears to include the tribal name Boy plus the Germanic element Haemus home. This Bohême included parts of southern Bohemia as well as parts of Bavaria and Austria. The Czech name Aochi is derived from the name of the Slavic tribe of Czechs who settled in the area during the 6th or 7th century AD. History. Ancient Bohemia, like neighboring Bavaria, is named after the Wa society, who were a large Celtic nation known to the Romans for their invasion and settlement in northern Italy. Another part of the nation moved west with the Helvetii into southern France, which was one of the events leading to the interventions of Julius Caesar's Gaulish campaign of 58 BC. The emigration of the Helvetii and Wa left southern Germany and Bohemia a lightly inhabited desert into which Suebic peoples arrived, speaking Germanic languages, and became dominant over remaining Celtic groups. Both Tacitus and Strabo refer to an area as Bohême named after the Wa. The second component of this name is a Germanic word, related to modern German Heim, and English home, so the term means Wa home. To the south, over the Danube, the Romans extended their empire, and to the southeast in Hungarian, the people living in Bohême bordered upon Sarmatian peoples. In the area of modern Bohemia the Marcomanni and other Suebic groups were led by their king Maroboduus, after suffering defeat to Roman forces in Germany. He took advantage of the natural defences provided by its mountains and forests. They were able to maintain a strong alliance with neighbouring tribes including the Lugir, Quadi, Hermundari, Semnones, and Buri, which was sometimes partly controlled by the Roman Empire, and sometimes in conflict with it, for example in the 2nd century when they fought Marcus Aurelius. In late classical times and the early Middle Ages, two new Suebic groupings appeared to the west of Bohemia in southern Germany, the Alemanni, and the Bavarians, the latter being derived from the ancient name of the Wa. Many Suebic tribes from the Bohemian region took part in such movements westwards, even settling as far away as Spain and Portugal. With them were also tribes who had pushed from the east, such as the Vandals, and Alans. Other groups pushed southwards towards Pannonia. After this migration period, Bohemia was partially repopulated around the 6th century, and eventually Slavic tribes arrived from the east, and their language began to replace the older Germanic, Celtic and Sarmatian ones. These are precursors of today's Czechs, though the exact amount of Slavic immigration is a subject of debate. The Slavic influx was divided into 2 or 3 waves. The first wave came from the southeast and east, when the Germanic Lombards left Bohemia. Soon after, from the 630s to 660s, the territory was taken by Samo's tribal confederation. His death marked the end of the Old Slavonic Confederation, the second attempt to establish such a Slavonic union after Carantania in Carinthia. Other sources divide the population of Bohemia at this time into the Mohani, Moravia, Böhmen and Fragonio. The great tribes of Dudalb, Lemus and Shvat are missing from this list, which shows a linguistic and cultural shift from Sarmatian in favor of Slavonic dialects, a common occurrence in nomadic immigrations. Christianity first appeared in the early 9th century, but only became dominant much later, in the 10th or 11th century. The 9th century was crucial for the future of Bohemia. The manorial system sharply declined, as it did in Bavaria. The influence of the central Fragonio Czechs grew, as a result of the important cultic center in their territory. They were Slavic-speaking and thus contributed to the transformation of diverse neighboring populations into a new nation named and led by them with a united Slavic ethnic consciousness. Part registered trademark Premyslid Dynasty. Bohemia was made a part of the early Slavic state of Great Moravia, under the rule of Svatopluk I. After Svatopluk's death, Great Moravia was weakened by years of internal conflict and constant warfare, ultimately collapsing and fragmenting due to the continual incursions of the invading nomadic Magyars. However, Bohemia's initial incorporation into the Moravian Empire resulted in the extensive Christianization of the population. A native monarchy arose to the throne, and Bohemia came under the rule of the part-registered trademark Premyslid Dynasty, which would rule the Czech lands for the next several hundred years. The part-registered trademark Premyslid secured their frontiers from the remnant Asian interlocutors, after the collapse of the Moravian state, by entering into a state of semi-vassalage to the Frankish rulers. This alliance was facilitated by Bohemia's conversion to Christianity, in the 9th century. Continuing close relations were developed with the East Frankish Kingdom, which devolved from the Carolingian Empire, into East Francia, eventually becoming the Holy Roman Empire. After a decisive victory of the Holy Roman Empire and Bohemia over invading Magyars in the 955 Battle of Lechfeld, Boleslaus I of Bohemia was granted the March of Moravia by German Emperor Otto the Great. Bohemia would remain a largely autonomous state under the Holy Roman Empire for several decades. The jurisdiction of the Holy Roman Empire was definitively reasserted when Jaromír of Bohemia was granted fief of the Kingdom of Bohemia by Emperor King Henry II of the Holy Roman Empire, with the promise that he hold it as a vassal once he reoccupied Prague with a German army in 1004, ending the rule of Boleslaw I of Poland. The first to use the title of King of Bohemia were the part-registered trademark Premyslid Dukes Vratislav II and Vladislav II, but their heirs would return to the title of Duke. The title of king became hereditary under Ottokar I. His grandson Ottokar II conquered a short-lived empire which contained modern Austria and Slovenia. The mid-13th century saw the beginning of substantial German immigration as the court sought to replace losses from the brief Mongol invasion of Europe in 1241. Germans settled primarily along the northern, western, and southern borders of Bohemia, although many lived in towns throughout the kingdom. Luxembourg Dynasty. The House of Luxembourg accepted the invitation to the Bohemian throne with the marriage to the Premyslid heirs, Elizabeth, and the crowning subsequent of John I of Bohemia in 1310. His son, Charles IV, became King of Bohemia in 1346. He founded Charles University in Prague, Central Europe's first university, 2 years later. His reign brought Bohemia to its peak both politically and in total area, resulting in his being the first king of Bohemia to also be elected as Holy Roman Emperor. Under his rule the Bohemian crown controlled such diverse lands as Moravia, Silesia, Upper Lusatia and Lower Lusatia, Brandenburg, an area around Nuremberg called New Bohemia, Luxembourg, and several small towns scattered around Germany. Hussite Bohemia. During the Ecumenical Council of Constance in 1415, Jan Hus, the rector of Charles University and a prominent reformer and religious thinker, was sentenced to be burnt at the stake as a heretic. The verdict was passed despite the fact that Hus was granted formal protection by Emperor Sigismund of Luxembourg prior to the journey. Hus was invited to attend the council to defend himself and the Czech positions in the religious court, but with the emperor's approval, he was executed on July 6, 1415. The execution of Hus, as well as 5 consecutive papal crusades against followers of Huss, forced the Bohemians to defend themselves. Their defense and rebellion against Roman Catholics became known as the Hussite Wars. The uprising against imperial forces was led by a former mercenary, Jan Angstrom 1/2 year 3/4 Kavchnov. As the leader of the Hussite armies, he used innovative tactics and weapons, such as howitzers, pistols, and fortified wagons, which were revolutionary for the time, and established Angstrom 1/2 year 3/4 Karl as a great general who never lost a battle. After Angstrom 1/2 year 3/4 Karl's death, Prokop the Great took over the command for the army, and under his lead the Hussites were victorious for another 10 years, to the sheer terror of Europe. The Hussite cause gradually splintered into 2 main factions, the moderate Utraquists and the more fanatic Taborites. The Utraquists began to lay the groundwork for an agreement with the Catholic Church and found the more radical views of the Taborites distasteful. Additionally, with general war weariness and yearning for order, the Utraquists were able to eventually defeat the Taborites in the Battle of Lipany in 1434. Sigismund said after the battle that only the Bohemians could defeat the Bohemians. Despite an apparent victory for the Catholics, the Bohemian Utraquists were still strong enough to negotiate freedom of religion in 1436. This happened in the so-called Basel Compacts, declaring peace and freedom between Catholics and Utraquists. It would only last for a short period of time, as Pope Pius II declared the Basel Compacts to be invalid in 1462. In 1458, George of Podbrady was elected to ascend to the Bohemian throne. He is remembered for his attempt to set up a pan-European Christian League, which would form all the states of Europe into a community based on religion. In the process of negotiating, he appointed Leo of Rosmetal to tour the European courts and to conduct the talks. However, the negotiations were not completed, because George's position was substantially damaged over time by his deteriorating relationship with the Pope. Habsburg monarchy. After the death of King Louis II of Hungary and Bohemia in the Battle of Moravia in 1526, Archduke Ferdinand of Austria became the new King of Bohemia and the country became a constituent state of the Habsburg monarchy. Bohemia enjoyed religious freedom between 1436 and 1620, and became one of the most liberal countries of the Christian world during that period. In 1609, Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II, who made Prague again the capital of the empire at the time, himself a Roman Catholic, was moved by the Bohemian nobility to publish Majestas Rudolfina, which confirmed the older Confessio Bohemica of 1575. After Emperor Ferdinand II began oppressing the rights of Protestants in Bohemia, the resulting Bohemian revolt led to outbreak of the 30 Years' War in 1618. Elector Frederick V of the Electorate of the Palatinate, a Protestant, was elected by the Bohemian nobility to replace Ferdinand on the Bohemian throne, and was known as the Winter King. Frederick's wife, the popular Elizabeth Stuart and subsequently Elizabeth of Bohemia, known as the Winter Queen or Queen of Hearts, was the daughter of King James I of England. However, after Frederick's defeat in the Battle of White Mountain in 1620, 27 Bohemian estates leaders together with Jan Jasenius, rector of the Charles University of Prague, were executed on the Prague's Old Town Square on June 21, 1621, and the rest were exiled from the country. Their lands were then given to Catholic loyalists. This ended the pro-Reformation movement in Bohemia and also ended the role of Prague as ruling city of the Holy Roman Empire. Until the so-called renewed Constitution of 1627, the German language was established as a second official language in the Czech lands. The Czech language remained the first language in the kingdom. Both German and Latin were widely spoken among the ruling classes, although German became increasingly dominant, while Czech was spoken in much of the countryside. The formal independence of Bohemia was further jeopardized when the Bohemian Diet approved administrative reform in 1749. It included the indivisibility of the Habsburg Empire and the centralization of rule. This essentially meant the merging of the Royal Bohemian Chancellery with the Austrian Chancellery. At the end of the 18th century, the Czech national revival movement, in cooperation with part of the Bohemian aristocracy, started a campaign for restoration of the kingdom's historic rights, whereby the Czech language was to replace German as the language of administration. The enlightened absolutism of Joseph II and Leopold II, who introduced minor language concessions, showed promise for the Czech movement, but many of these reforms were later rescinded. During the Revolution of 1848, many Czech nationalists called for autonomy for Bohemia from Habsburg Austria, but the revolutionaries were defeated. The old Bohemian Diet, one of the last remnants of the independence, was dissolved, although the Czech language experienced a rebirth as Romantic nationalism developed among the Czechs. In 1861, a new elected Bohemian Diet was established. The renewal of the old Bohemian crown became the official political program of both Czech liberal politicians and the majority of Bohemian aristocracy, while parties representing the German minority and small part of the aristocracy proclaimed their loyalty to the centralistic constitution. After the defeat of Austria in the Austro-Prussian War in 1866, Hungarian politicians achieved the Austro-Hungarian Compromise of 1867, ostensibly creating equality between the Austrian and Hungarian halves of the empire. An attempt by the Czechs to create a tripartite monarchy failed in 1871. However, the state rights program remained the official platform of all Czech political parties until 1918. 20th century. After World War I, Bohemia became the core of the newly formed country of Czechoslovakia, which combined Bohemia, Moravia, Austrian Silesia, Upper Hungary and Carpathian Ruthenia into one state. Under its first president, Tomáš Masaryk, Czechoslovakia became a liberal democratic republic, but serious issues emerged regarding the Czech majority's relationship with the native German and Hungarian minorities. Following the Munich Agreement in 1938, the border regions of Bohemia, historically inhabited predominantly by ethnic Germans, were annexed to Nazi Germany. This was the only time in Bohemian history that its territory was politically divided. The remnants of Bohemia and Moravia were then annexed by Germany in 1939, while the Slovak lands became the separate Slovak Republic, a puppet state of Nazi Germany. From 1939 to 1945, Bohemia together with Moravia formed the German Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. Any open opposition to German occupation was brutally suppressed by the Nazi authorities, and many Czech patriots were executed as a result. After World War II ended in 1945, the vast majority of remaining Germans were expelled by force by the order of the re-established Czechoslovak central government, based on the Potsdam Agreement, and their property was confiscated by the Czech authorities. This severely depopulated the area, and from this moment on locals were only referred to in their Czech equivalents regardless of their previous demographic makeup. In 1946, per the Potsdam Agreement, and under the stipulation that it be placed under Polish administration, the post-war Communist Party backed by the Soviet Union re-established Czechoslovakia. The party won the most votes in free elections, but not a simple majority. Klement Gottwald, the communist leader, became prime minister of a coalition government. In February 1948, the non-communist members of the government resigned in protest against arbitrary measures by the communists and their Soviet protectors in many of the state's institutions. Gottwald and the communists responded with a coup d'état and installed a pro-Soviet authoritarian state. Beginning in 1949, Bohemia ceased to be an administrative unit of Czechoslovakia, as the country was divided into administrative regions. Between 1949 and 1989, Czechoslovakia became a Soviet satellite, even though there was not a Soviet army present until 1968, when Czechoslovak Communist Party started to reform and democratize itself. This Prague Spring process was stopped abruptly by an invasion of brotherly armies of Warsaw Pact in August 1968. Temporary stationing of Soviet army following the invasion ended in 1991. In 1989, Agnes of Bohemia became the first saint from a Central European country to be canonized by Pope John Paul II before the Velvet Revolution later that year. After the dissolution of Czechoslovakia in 1993, the territory of Bohemia became part of the new Czech Republic. The Czech Constitution from 1992 refers to the citizens of the Czech Republic in Bohemia, Moravia and Silesia, and proclaims continuity with the statehood of the Bohemian Crown. Bohemia is not currently an administrative unit of the Czech Republic. Instead, it is divided into the Prague, Central Bohemia, PLZEA, Karlovy Vary, Ashton nad Labem, Liberec, and Rade Králové copyright regions, as well as parts of the Pardubis, Vysocina, South Bohemian and South Moravian regions. See also: Moravia, Czech Silesia, Bohemianism, Crown of Bohemia, German Bohemia, History of the Czech lands, Lech, Czech and Rus, List of rulers of Bohemia, Sudetenland, Bohemia at the 1908 Summer Olympics, references. Further reading: Hugh, Agnew. The Czechs and the Lands of the Bohemian Crown. Hohe Press, Stanford. ISBN 0-8179-4491-5. External links: Bohemia, Province of Bohemia, Czech Catholic Church, official website.